File challenge number 2 is a little bit easier. And basically what I want you to do is go back and choose one of your apps that you've created already in this class. I mean, you could create a new one if you wanted to, but I want you to add permanent storage to that app so that when you exit that app, that data is saved, and when you go back in, that saved data is loaded. I would suggest that the ideal candidate for the app that you might want to use for this is your ATM app, because that's one where you want it to save the balance from time to time. So if we take a look at how that would work, let's say I've got my ATM demo here, and I've got my accounts set up as a dictionary, and I've got a little while true loop that does my menus. I can list my accounts, I can make a deposit, I can make a withdrawal. I didn't do error checking in here because I've kept it really streamlined for this example. But if I run this, you can see it checks the balances. I make a deposit, savings. Let's put a lot of money in there. There's my new balance. So if I check my balances, there's my balances. The problem is when I quit this app and I rerun it, my balance is reset back to the original. And that's what we don't want in a banking app, because what would be the point of that? That's not useful for anybody. So what we need to do is look at this app and figure out where do we put those scripts, because we need one that loads the data and we need one that saves the data. So where do we want to load the data? The time we want to load the data is when we start the program. Now right here, when we start the program, it creates this variable and puts this data in it. Same data every time. So right here, we only want it to do this like the first time we run the program. The first time we run the program, it should start by creating the initial accounts. But after that, we want it to load the data from the file, not from this. So what do we need to do? We need to check to see if the file exists when we run the program. So we're going to import. I'm going to import OS and pickle. I can put them on one line like that, or I can use separate import statements. Both of those work, okay? If you put them on one line, you separate them by a comma. I'm importing OS because I want to check and see if my bank data, if my bank data file exists. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to say if os.path.exists, and I'm going to say ATM data.text. If ATM data exists, then I want to load the data from it. Okay, so if it exists, I want to load the data from it. So what do I do to load the data? I create a file. Using open. And of course, I'm going to use this file name. Now, if I'm going to use that file name more than one place, what I might want to do is change it to file, str file. I'll just do that, str file. Then I can change the save data file in just one place, str file, comma, and I'm going to use read binary. And now I want to use pickle. So I'm going to load it into D accounts, and I'm going to say pickle.load, and I'm going to load the ATM data file. And then I'm going to print data was loaded, and then I'm going to close the file. ATM data file dot close. There we go. Okay, so that's if the file exists, meaning I've already run the program and there's saved data from the previous time I ran it. If this is the first time I run the program, that file does not exist. And so I'll use else, and I'll use this to initialize my data. But now we're a little more sophisticated. I'm going to use that to start out with a zero balance, because in the real world, when you open a savings account, it doesn't magically have $123 in it. It has zero. So when I initialize the accounts, it's going to be zero. Now, that is good for me to load the data. What I need to do now is figure out how to save the data. And where do I save the data? I save the data anytime I change the balance of my account. Anytime those numbers change, I need to save it. So I need to save it after I make a deposit and after I make a withdrawal. If I'm doing the same thing in multiple places in my code, that would mean I would write the exact same code in two places. That doesn't make sense from a structural standpoint, and it doesn't make sense to my lazy brain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a save data function that will save the data for me. So I'm going to define save data, and that's going to take a dictionary object that I pass it as a parameter. And now I want to create ATM data file again, and I'm going to use open, and I'm going to use str file, and I'm going to open it for writing in binary. And then I'm going to save the data in that file. So I'm going to say pickle.dump, and I'm going to give it the data that I want to save, which is d data, and ATM data file is the container for that data. Now I do the close operation, ATM data file.close, clean up after myself, and I can print data was saved. Okay. So there is my save data function, quick and easy. Now that it's defined, I can close it or I can roll it up. And so the nice thing, that one thing that I can do now that I have this is, in addition to saving it after a deposit and a withdrawal, is I might want to just save it right here, so that immediately after I create those accounts for the first time, I save that file. Then it just creates it, and it always exists from there on. So save data, and I'm going to pass it d accounts, there we go, as its parameter or as an argument. Now I can do that same thing here. Let's go save data, d accounts, and right after I make the change, I'm going to save it, save data, d accounts. Okay, so there it is. Now I've implemented saving and loading data from that. Let's run it. Okay, so look, right up here, data was saved. That means it created that data for the first time and saved it. A file right here. There is my ATM data file right there. Okay, so I'm running this, and if the next time I run it, look what it says. It says data was loaded, which means it's loading the data from that file now. Now, after the first time I've run that, I am doing that from the file. So if I check my balances, I've got zero in there. Let's make a deposit. Savings, and we'll deposit $100. New savings balance. Okay, so let's put some money in checking. Make a deposit. And we'll do checking. Oops, that's going to be an error. That's the problem with not handling it. Okay, so let's make a deposit in checking. And the amount, let's do 300 in there. Okay, so my balances are 100 and 300. If I exit the program, I go back in, data was loaded. Now you can see my balances have been loaded from the file, and they'll stay the same. So now here's something that's kind of annoying, right? When we have amounts that are decimals and it's got a trailing zero, it's going to chop that one off. And we can't have that with dollars, even if it's 0 cents. So there's something we can do, and I'm going to show you. It's called a formatting code, but I'm going to do it inside my placeholder right here, where it's showing me the money, the dollar amount. And I'm going to put a colon and point to F. And I'm going to do the same thing right here. Colon, point to F. Colon, point to F. And what that does is it forces it to 2 decimal places after. So now, if I check my account, my balances, it gives me the full set of decimal places after. Okay? So that is how you force that formatting. And now I can make a withdrawal. And the balance works properly as well. So now that will forever be stored here as long as I keep that data file. It's going to keep track of those balances for me. Yeah.
Is that formatting file or like the way you did? Is it in the notes? Like, is it in the video?
It will be after I post the video for this class.
Okay.
Yeah. I believe it is in the text, the textbook for the class. And if you forget, just look up F-string formatting codes. That's the most commonly used one. There are several others. This is pretty much one of the only ones that I actually use. But there are others that you can use to apply to placeholders in formatting.